The idea of eternalism, that all times are equally real in the block universe, can seem quite bleak. Now, we already had a notion that reality is rather bleak if we follow what Newton taught us, namely that we might well live in what's called a deterministic universe, where the future is predetermined, preordained, even though it hasn't happened yet.
The age-old debates of divine selection versus free will poses a profound question. If our fates are preordained by the Creator, can we truly claim to have free will? Join us as we dive into this intriguing discussion and explore its connection to space-time.
That's what's called the clockwork universe, where everything's ticking by mechanistically and everything. Causes lead to effects. And, if we were powerful enough, we could work out what those effects will be. We could predict the future. But in Newton's clockwork universe, even though that future is preordained, it's destined to be, it still doesn't exist. And so we can still imagine that we have free will. You look back after something has happened, you say, well, it was ever thus. That was ever going to be the way it has, because the universe has evolved deterministically. But when it comes to the block universe and eternalism, that future, it's not that future has yet to unfold. It's already there waiting for us. Somehow that is a more stark description of determinism and a stronger assault on free will.
This is seen as an assault on free will because if divine determinism is true, then you can never do other than what you were preordained to do. Let's dig deeper into this and some of the other theories presented by Professor Jim Al-Khalili and other physicists regarding spacetime. For those who are not familiar with the term predestination, Bible Hub describes it as a theological doctrine that refers to the belief that the Most High in His sovereignty has foreordained all events and outcomes, particularly concerning the eternal destiny of human souls. The concept is rooted in the understanding of Yah's omniscience and omnipotence, asserting that He has predetermined who will be saved and who will not. So predestination is closely associated with the doctrines of election and reprobation. Here are the theological implications. Predestination raises profound questions about human free will, divine justice, and the nature of the Most High's love. It's often discussed in the context of the tension between Yah's sovereignty and human responsibility. Some argue that predestination negates free will. Others maintain that Yah's foreordination is compatible with human choice, as Yah's knowledge and will do not coerce human actions, but rather encompass them. Now, I don't know about you, but that answer is not adequately addressing the point about the ability of man to exercise free will if the Creator has already predetermined what He will and will not do in life. And that may be why there's ongoing debate about the matter, particularly when you consider how the word predestination is used in Scripture. Let's look at some examples. Ephesians 1 talks about how the Father blessed us with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places in Messiah, just as he chose us in him, in Messiah, before the foundation of the world, to be holy and without blame. Now just pause right there. We were chosen before the world was even created. How is that even possible? It also says he predestined us to adoption as sons. Romans 8 says there are those who are the called according to the Most High's purpose. And then it says he foreknew them and predestined them to be conformed to the image of his Son. But it goes even deeper in saying that those he predestined for this calling were also justified and glorified. So all of this happened before the creation of the world. How do you explain that? Well, some say this doctrine of predestination or election is very hard to explain because the concept is so mysterious. So they say it belongs to the secret things of the Creator. In other words, we can't understand it unless he reveals the mystery to us. Let's look at some Old Testament examples. We see here in Jeremiah 1:5 that the Most High's foreknowledge and predestination of the prophet Jeremiah also included his purpose. He tells Jeremiah that he knew him before he formed him in his mother's womb. Jeremiah was to be a prophet to the nations, not just the nation of Israel, but to the nations. And when you read the book of Jeremiah, you see that his prophecies often address the spiritual condition of Israel when he warned them of impending judgment because of their continued unfaithfulness. And there are also prophecies about the destruction of Egypt, Philistia, and Babylon. Let's highlight some other examples of predestination based on Scripture. We know that Abraham was called out of his homeland and promised that through him a great nation would be formed. This was before he had any children. This choice was not based on Abraham's achievements, but on the Most High's purpose. So we see divine election here. Jacob and Esau are also good examples. Before the twins were born, the Most High declared that the older would serve the younger. The statement was made before either child had done anything good or bad. And then we have Joseph, who was betrayed by his brothers and sold into slavery. Later, he realized that the Most High allowed those things to preserve many lives during the famine. So, trying to understand the complexity of predestination and whether or not you have the ability to decide your own future is directly related to time and the one who created it. We're going to look at this article called God and Time. It says any theistic view of the world includes some notion of how God is related to the structures of the universe, including space and time. The question of God's relation to time has generated a great amount of theological and philosophical reflection. The traditional view has been that God is timeless in the sense of being outside time altogether. That is, he exists but does not exist at any point in time, and he does not experience temporal succession. What may be the dominant view of philosophers today is that he is temporal but everlasting. That is, God never began to exist, and he never will go out of existence. He exists at each moment in time. It says deciding how best to think of God's relation to time will involve bringing to bear one's views about other aspects of the divine nature. How a philosopher thinks about God's knowledge and his interaction with his people within the temporal world shapes how that philosopher will think about God's relation to time and vice versa. In addition, other metaphysical considerations also play important roles in the discussion. For example, the nature of time and the nature of the origin of the universe each have a bearing on whether God is best thought of as timeless or temporal. So we can see the paradox here, especially when you add the notion of free will into this. Physicists are having a hard time understanding the structure of the universe because there is very little understanding of the one who created it. And that's why there are so many different theories. So let's go back to the presentation.
In order to then try and have some concrete idea of what time is, philosophers have come up with different ways of describing, whether there was a special present moment that divides the past from the future. Einstein tells us that time is the fourth dimension. And others will argue that time doesn't exist at all. It's all just an illusion. It's a construct. It's something that we've invented, or it's the thing that clocks measure. Okay, so if you've come with me this far, and we've been through some heavy stuff, talking about arrows of time and unifying the laws of physics and so on, maybe it's time for some fun, a little bit of dessert. A question I'm often asked when it comes to the nature of time is whether we can travel through time. After all, if you think about time, according to Einstein, as part of four-dimensional space-time, then I can move through space. I can exist at this point in space or that point in space, and I can come back to this point, and I can travel around. How is it? Why is it that we can't do the same with time? Why can't we move up and down the time axis? Why are we stuck inexorably moving along the time axis when all times supposedly are there and exist? Well, of course, time isn't exactly like another dimension of space. It is different. It is special. Einstein's theories of relativity may not be the last word on whether or not we can travel through time, but they're the best we have at the moment, and they do tell us something about the possibility of time travel.
And this possibility of time travel really excites them. You're seeing it a lot more in movies. They're beginning to see time as a complex phenomenon that is not merely a ticking clock, but possibly a dimension of the universe woven into the fabric of reality. So, what he calls the time axis is very important, specifically regarding how we are moving along through life and how it pertains to predestination. They are trying to find a way to go forward to know the future. It's what we call prophecy. Or they want to move backwards to try to change the past so that they can change their outcome. In the last session, I talked about how light allows time to slow things down so that we can see or experience life on Earth. So when you think about the space-time continuum or time axis, it's like snapshots of our lives that are being recorded so that it can be played back at the end of life, so that you can see exactly what you did in this body.
But real physics says when we talk about time travel, we have to make a distinction between the possibility of time travel into the future and time travel back into the past. And it turns out one is easier than the other. Time travel into the future is easy. And I don't just mean if I sit still, tomorrow will eventually arrive, I've time traveled into tomorrow. No, what I mean by time travel into the future is getting there before everyone else. And relativity theory says this is possible by slowing time down. So if I were to head off in a rocket at close to the speed of light and zip around the galaxy for, I don't know, a week, when I come back to Earth, by virtue of traveling very fast, but also, one should say, because I'm accelerating and changing direction, and therefore acceleration being equivalent to gravity means my time is running slower. Essentially, less time will have elapsed for me when I return to Earth than has gone by on Earth without me. So I may have only experienced a few weeks of time travel, but I may return back to Earth years in the future. In a sense, it's not real time travel because it's not that the future was already there waiting for me. I've just sort of fast forwarded to the future. I've moved in along a different timeline, a different world line through space-time, and arrived at the future with less time having gone by for me than for everyone else. But as far as I'm concerned, I could arrive in the future arbitrarily in the distant future, depending on how closely I got to the speed of light or how strong a gravitational field I felt. So in the film Interstellar, Matthew McConaughey's character is an astronaut. They land on this water planet that's in orbit around a supermassive black hole. That gravity is slowing time so much. The astronauts in the movie know that for every hour they spend on that planet, 7 years are going by on Earth. And then sure enough, Matthew McConaughey's character has time traveling in the future, having not aged that much. He's not been away that long, but his young daughter's now an old lady. Whether or not you regard that as real time travel is up to you. Much more interesting, of course, is whether we can time travel back into the past. And again, general relativity doesn't rule this out. Theoretically, we can think of such notions, what are called closed time-like curves, which would be the equivalent of riding on a roller coaster and doing a sort of loop-the-loop. As you're traveling along it, your time is unfolding normally. But you would loop back in time, you could arrive back at the point in space that you left, but at an earlier moment in time. So you can travel back in time that way. The problem, of course, is that this leads to all sorts of paradoxes. So while general relativity strictly doesn't rule out time travel into the past, it leads to all sorts of conundrums which we find rather difficult to get over.
Think of it this way. If they travel forward to know what will happen, they'll try to stop certain things because they want things to always work out well for them. Much like the storyline in the Terminator series. Why not just read the prophecies? It's already telling us what their end will be. And just FYI, if they're thinking about it, it means they're already trying to do it. And they're being emboldened with AI technology. But now he's going to talk about the concept of parallel universes. And it's the main point I want you to hear, because it's going to help us understand divine selection versus free will. Listen to this next part.
Quantum world, one of the popular ways of explaining the weirdness of the quantum world is to subscribe to what's called the many worlds interpretation, that every time anywhere in the universe, down at the quantum level, something's faced with a choice, the universe branches into multiple options. Famously, Schrodinger's cat in the box that's dead and alive at the same time, and you open the box to make up its mind because it's made of atoms, and atoms can exist in multiple states. Well, in the many worlds interpretation, there's a you that opens the box to find an alive cat, and there's a you that opens the box to find the dead cat. So these parallel universes exist. This helps us if we're trying to insist on the possibility of time travel into the past.
Now, I'm not necessarily promoting his idea that there are all of these parallel universes out there. I just wanted you to hear the concept to make it easier for you to understand predestination. But before we dig deeper into that discussion about predestination versus free will, we need to understand these three attributes of the Most High. The three omni-attributes of Yah characterize him as all-powerful, all-knowing, and everywhere present. Each of these involves the other two, and each provides a perspective on the all-embracing lordship of the true God. In other words, his ownership of creation. Now, with that understanding, this idea of the universe branching into many options when you are faced with a choice is how we can understand predestination. When he sees you, he sees your past, your present, and future, because on that space-time axis, your beginning and end has already been recorded. You made choices exercising your free will. Because you can't say that someone has free will, then say, oh, well, the Creator has already made the decision for you. No, the fact that the Father is all-knowing, all-seeing, and his knowledge extends to all parts of his creation is why he can tell the end from the beginning. Before you were born, he saw your entire life and the choices you would make. Think about the space-time continuum and how everything that has happened or will happen in your life is already written on a scroll. And the presenter called it a time axis. The question is, when did you make the choice? Because the Most High is outside of time, he is able to see everything in time. He's above it. So you made choices about various things before you put on this earth suit. Your time here allowed it to be made manifest in the physical world. How likely is it that the Creator can know everything and not know that Adam and Eve would eat from that tree? Of course he knew. But the garden is where the decision manifested in the physical realm. But he knew that they would do it. So it's similar, or understanding predestination is similar to the idea of fixed probability, and that was the simplest way to describe what this means. This says the concept of fixed probability refers to the idea that certain events are predetermined by a higher power. So these things cannot be changed. This is often associated with the theological doctrine of predestination, which asserts that all events are made to happen by the Most High and not by causality in nature. Now think about the word predestination. You know before you get there. The Most High has already seen everything that will happen, and he has determined what the desired end will be. You are here because of the part you play in the outcome. Just think about that for a second. If the Creator has already seen your life ahead of time, he is aware of your decisions and how it will fit in the timeline. So some vessels are chosen for honor and some for dishonor. Before Abraham was born, the Most High knew that he would believe. So out of all of the men who would be born, he chose him to be the father of many nations. What did the Most High say about Abraham? I have known him in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Most High to do righteousness and justice, that the Most High may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. So he knew this about him. So he was chosen. And it gets deeper when we look at the children of Israel, but we'll get into that in the next session. Let's look at some other examples. We talked about Adam and Eve eating from the tree. Well, the Most High had to know that. But here we see in 1 Peter 1:20, where it's talking about Messiah, that he indeed was foreordained before the foundation of the world, but was manifest in these last times for you. Manifest in the last times, why? Let's look at that. Revelation 13:8, all who dwell on the earth will worship him, speaking of Messiah, whose names have not been written in the book of the life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. The Lamb was slain from the foundation of the world. So the Lamb represents the body that would be manifested in the fullness of time, because the fall of man was known before Adam was placed in the garden. Do you see this? The Lamb was slain from the foundation of the world. This is telling you that our time here allows things to manifest in the physical world. Listen to what Messiah said about Judas. While I was with them in the world, I kept them in your name. Those whom you gave me I have kept, and none of them is lost, except the son of perdition, that the scripture might be fulfilled. So it was already known, it was already written, preordained what Judas would do. He was chosen for that purpose. Judas made the decision before he was born. How else could it have already been written? He made the choice. 1 Corinthians 10:13, no temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But Yah is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. This is telling us here that yes, the temptation is presented, but you will have the opportunity to choose right from wrong. Let's go on. So predestination is the belief that the Most High has eternally chosen certain individuals for salvation, and it emphasizes his sovereignty and divine plan, suggesting that those who are saved are part of his predetermined purpose. This is true. Free will is the concept that individuals have the capacity to make choices. It emphasizes human responsibility and the ability to accept or reject Yah's grace. This is also true. The Father already knew what your decisions would be in this life. And this is why he says to Jeremiah, I knew you before I formed you in the womb. Like I said, there is more to this, but we will have to continue in the next session. If this message has been a blessing to you, remember to hit the like and share. You're also welcome to subscribe if you have not already done so. We normally upload messages on Sunday mornings at 8:30 a.m. Yah willing. Join me next time.